Alrighty, welcome in. Today, I am joined by my client and one of my best friends in the world, actually, Danielle Towle. Um, Danielle and I have known each other we were doing this math when Jordan and Phil and her husband Jordan is one of my best friends as well. And then our other friend Phil and his wife Amy and my wife Megan, we're all, just family basically. And Jordan and Phil and I went away a few weeks ago for a little guys' weekend away. I think we were talking about it's been 10 years that
Yep.
we've known each other, which is wild. And when we first met, there were no children between the three families, and now there are 10. There are 10 children between us, which is just alarming.
10 and 10.
10 and 10, yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited to have Danielle on to share a little bit of her story because she and I have been working together for over a year now, I think, or about a year. And it's just been really fun to walk alongside her in this, but I also think she's just got a really great perspective and can relate to a lot of people. So I appreciate you coming on, Danielle.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.
So I want to start here. What made you originally decide to reach out to me? Because it's a little bit of an interesting thing, like dynamic wise. Originally, it's like, because we are basically family, to just be like, hey, what are you gonna, like, you've known for a long time that I do what I do. What kind of prompted you to reach out and be like, hey, let's make a move in this direction?
Right. Yeah. So there were kind of a couple of things. One was like, I was 32 at the time, had three young kids, was like a year and a half postpartum with my third. And with each kid, you're trying to kind of figure out like, what's my body now?
Mm-hmm.
Because your body changes so much in pregnancy and post and all of that. And it's like, it's almost like an identity crisis, honestly, like to kind of figure out like, who am I now? I'm probably never going to go back to the body and the woman I was before, and that's fine. But like trying to figure out like what's healthy for me now, what's good for me now. And I just felt like I was at a place where I was like, what is happening now is not good for me.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm doing now is not good. Um, I didn't feel like I was like, I wasn't like 100 pounds overweight or something like that. It wasn't anything like really crazy, but like I just didn't feel good. I didn't feel like myself. I didn't feel like I could parent and mother the way I wanted to. I didn't feel like I could be as present with my husband, and I just like, I was tired and I was, just lethargic and slow and sluggish, and I just didn't like myself in a way, like, to be honest. I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't really like who I was.
Yeah.
Um, and so there was that. There was also like my husband, Jordan, had worked with you before. And like we
Mm-hmm.
said, we're really good friends. And Jordan had seen great results. Um, so I knew like, I mean, there was no doubt in my mind that like you were the person I was going to go to. It just
Mm-hmm.
made a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so knowing that like, okay, Jordan has seen great results in the past. So I know that if I like, and I can trust Jeff, if I go with Jeff, like I'm gonna, whatever the results are gonna be, I'm gonna like, I'm gonna like them. Whatever the goal is, whatever the goal is. I wasn't even really sure starting out what the goal was. I just
Yeah.
knew I didn't like where I was. Is really what
Yeah.
like that's where it was. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, and you had it was right before we started working together too, is when you had your back injury as well.
Yeah, so the timing of that is kind of funny. So like I had what I thought at the time was a minor back issue.
Yeah.
It was getting better. I was doing stretches, I was doing physical therapy, I was going to chiropractic. It was getting better. It
Mm-hmm.
was like I think had been about a month or so. It was getting better. But like, it was more than that. It was like my physical health as well, of the rest of me, that I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to reach out to you about. And then it was literally like, I'm trying to even remember. I reached out to you and it was like that week or the week after
Mm-hmm.
that, all of a sudden it was like, oh no, it's much worse
Yeah.
than it was. Like something happened. Well, I did a long driving trip with my husband, And when I got back, my back was like a total mess, like worse than it had ever been.
Yeah.
And was like, okay, I can't keep going like this anyway. So then it
Mhm.
like really shifted the way that we had to work together, because now
Yeah.
I was coming into it with this like major herniated disc that was causing me constant pain.
Yeah.
Like sleeping was a problem. I couldn't play with my kids. There were just so many things that like, not only was I not like physically happy with my body and who I was after kids, but I also like physically couldn't do things, and it was like I don't even know where to begin,
Yeah.
like where to go from here. Yeah.
It was like a physical representation of how you felt. I remember you saying like it was
Yeah.
like this is like a physical manifestation of how I'm feeling, which is like my body is not my own right now, and
Yeah.
it's like not doing what I want it to do. It's not feeling how I want it to feel, and it's super frustrating. So just to back up a little bit, right? You had at the time, so Olivia, your youngest, was 18 months old, and then you had a 3-year old and then a 4.5-year old, basically at the time. It was like 18
Mm-hmm.
months apart,
Yeah.
give or
Yeah.
take.
4 and 5.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it
Mm,
was
3 and 5.
basically you had been on this pregnant, breastfeeding, very
Right.
brief window, pregnant
Right.
again,
You're right.
for 5 years, basically,
Right.
is what
Yep.
you had been doing. Was your body was on loan. I remember you
Absolutely.
saying it this way: your body was a home and a nourishment source for your children for 5 years. And
Yeah.
so, can you talk a little bit more about like not feeling at home in your body after having kids? Because I think that that's a really common feeling, that it's like, what, 5 years is not a short period of time
Right. Right.
to just not be able to do all things that you want to do and not be the sole
Yeah.
source of providing everything for your children.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, it's really like, it's kind of like an identity crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And, especially because I didn't have a break between kids. It was just that it was really 5 straight years, or
Mm-hmm.
6 if you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, of just, yeah, baby, 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 and nursing, nursing,
Mm-hmm.
nursing. Um, so after that, I would, at the point around the time that I contacted you, it was, a few months after I was done breastfeeding. So finally, I was at a
Mm-hmm.
place where it was like, okay, now I have to kind of like figure out what this body even is anymore,
Yeah.
right? Like my hips are bigger, my
Mm-hmm.
my legs are bigger, my all these things are bigger and different, and I mean curvier. Some
Mm-hmm.
people get the curve, some people don't, but curvier, or like, or just like I have extra fat. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, let's
Yeah.
just be blunt
Just
about it.
call
That's
it
what it
call it what it
is.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it is. I can say
Yeah.
flabby skin, but it's fat, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We can be honest here.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, the stuff that wasn't there before, extra
Yeah.
fat, extra things that weren't there before. And I had to really figure out like, okay, what is healthy for me now? Like healthy
Mm-hmm.
for me 5 years ago, healthy for me in high school, healthy for me in college is not the same as healthy for Danielle now.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm like able and capable of doing now is very different than what I was able and capable of doing before children. So like
Yeah.
what can I actually do? What's a reasonable way for me to make a healthy change? And with my body, like, I mean, I just had to kind of come to grips with like, I am not going to be that same woman. And I think there's part of that that's hard,
Mm-hmm.
honestly. Like, I'm not the same woman that I was, and you can look back, at old pictures and be like, oh man, remember when I looked like that?
Mm-hmm.
You absolutely do that. I think probably every mom has done that
Mm-hmm.
multiple times in their lives. Look back and been like, man, I can't believe I used to look that way, right? Look how skinny I was, or whatever. But you have to realize like you are a different person now, and that's not a bad thing. Like, change is good. And even people that don't have kids, even women that don't physically like birth a child and grow a child, there's still, your body just goes through changes as you age. So, but it's all just like really quick. It's not like this
Mm-hmm.
slow process of that. Like, it's like all of a sudden you're like, you have to come to grips with this reality that I am not who I was, and how do I become okay with who I am now?
Yeah, or make the most out of where I
Right.
am now. Um,
Yeah.
because it's different. Like the way that and I think you'll resonate with this because Jordan was in a car accident, but it's like if you're in a car accident, like a fairly significant car accident, you will always have to some degree the scars of that car accident. Like you'll never
Mm.
not have been in a car accident. That doesn't mean that,
Right.
for some people, right, that depending on how severe it is, right, that could define the rest of your life to some degree. But for him, who was able to walk away, right, like it's still like I remember driving with him shortly afterward, and for a long period of time, it's still kind of in his mind. Like you always have the marks of that. And
Yeah.
I've said a lot of times, once you're postpartum, you're always postpartum. Like it's
Right.
not a window, and the idea that you're going to bounce back, like all of that phrasing is it diminishes, I think, the significance of what's been done,
Yeah.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you made three people, like
Right.
literally made them in
Yeah.
you, and then like nourish them basically exclusively over that period of time. And so the goal, I don't know if the primary goal ought to be to look like you never did that.
Right.
You can make, if that's what you want, but it is the goal of how I think you phrase it is, at, now that this has happened, how do I come to terms with this new body that I am living in that has done this incredible thing, but will forever have the memory of that journey?
Right. And it's interesting too because like motherhood, I mean, I don't want anyone to hear this and think that I'm like hating on non-natural births and
Mm-hmm.
women who don't breastfeed or aren't able,
Mm-hmm.
whatever your decisions are. I'm not trying to like diminish any of that. We all go through different journeys, but there's just like something really incredible about like being a mother
Mm-hmm.
and birthing a child or nursing a child or raising a child, right? All of those things. Like there's just something really powerful and empowering about that, that is really hard to explain unless
Mm-hmm.
you're a parent and probably unless you're a mom. Like I don't think
Mm-hmm.
dads can experience that in the same way.
Not in the same way.
Um, yeah, not in the same way. And you're like, like your physical body is changing, but you are changing emotionally, you're
Mm-hmm.
changing spiritually, you're changing like in your body, your whole self, your whole being is changing, not
Mm-hmm.
just physically. So like there's just so many things changing about you at one time that like, yeah, it's just this like desert storm. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
perfect storm. I get perfect storm, I think is what I meant.
Yeah.
Perfect storm of like all these things coming together, which can be a really, once again, beautiful, powerful, incredible thing if you allow it to. Like you
Mm-hmm.
could definitely go the other way and it can be something that like tears you apart and you like want to be that person you were before and you like really really struggle, or you can allow it to say okay, like I'm not that person I was anymore, things have changed, I have changed, like I said, physically, emotionally, spiritually, like let's work with that, let's
Mm.
move from that, instead of being like how do I get like that bounce back, how do I
Yeah.
get back to who I was, is just not a great way to think about it at all. It's not going to be healthy for you.
Well, in no other way do you wish. Like, I mean, there's might be some moments where I think where parents are like, it'd be kind of nice to not have to figure out a babysitter for this, to be able to just go and do this thing that I want to do, or not wake up at 2 a.m. with a kid who pooped
Right.
himself. But
Right.
the the concept around bouncing back almost diminishes what you've done, in the sense of like, and glorifies the past that we probably wouldn't want to go back to. So like the idea of your high
Right.
school self, right? Like, man, I was so fit in high school. It's like, yeah, but do you remember high school? Remember how like
Right.
terrible high school was, and how like angsty, and you know what I mean? Like how just you couldn't pay me to go back to high school. You just couldn't do it.
Right.
And if you're in a place where you're like, high school was the best time of my life, I feel for you. I really do. Like, honestly, like
Yeah.
it's that's just
That was
that's a
it.
rough way.
Yeah.
That was it. That's a
Yeah.
rough way to live, man. Like, and so like you were a child. You were a literal
Right.
child in high school. So like let's not compare your grown adult body to a child's body, because there's just
Right.
not a lot of logic there. And the decision making, right? You remember like how I had this pop up on my Facebook memories comes up, and Facebook was like really really big when we were like the last couple of years of high school and
Yeah.
beginning of college, where used it like Twitter is used now, just like every thought that was your status update.
Yes. Yes.
And
Oh
right
gosh.
around this time is when college stuff comes in. And every year I look at the memories and it pops up, and it's like every day it's just angsty 18-year-old Jeff being like, I don't know where I'm going to college. I can't make a decision. And I'm like, what a whiny baby. Like but that kid was,
Yeah.
you know, you could see all of his abs, and it's like, all right, but all
Right.
he had to do was just be a kid, like a literal child. And so it is, I think sometimes we can be wishful about a time that we wouldn't actually want to go back to, but we're not
Right.
willing to recognize that in order to get all of the other things that we got, we had to that's the cost of doing business, is like you lose some of your freedom in order to make some more money, as a for instance, like you get to choose that cost, but you grew up and you had kids, and so that's kind of the byproduct of that, is you don't look like you're 14 anymore.
Right. Right. Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about like there's things that are good and
Mm-hmm.
there's things that are better. And sometimes we get stuck in the good because like it's a good thing. Like why do we want to
Yeah,
change, right? Like that's a
yeah.
good thing. And then when you actually make that choice to say, "No, I want something better. I want something
Mm-hmm.
better for me. I want something better for my family. I want something better for my spouse, for our relationship together," right? That you can go, "Okay, I'm willing to make that change to go from good to better."
Mm-hmm.
That's it, like a huge moment, a huge step.
And that's an adult decision. Child's
Right.
decisions are between good and bad. Adults'
Right.
decisions are between good and better. Like
Right.
it's no longer a question. You might not do everything right, but you're no longer questioning like some of the basic fundamental, like, all right, this is a good decision or this is a really wrong decision. Like there's not a lot of that. It's, do I leave this job for this job? For you guys, right? Do we leave a really, like, Danielle and Jordan moved halfway down the East Coast for another job, left their families and their friends and their community to go to a place that they didn't really know, because they were leaving a good thing to go to something where the hope was that it was going to be better. And I think
Hmm.
now, a couple of years removed, you could say, yeah, it's better in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean I don't miss the things that we
Right.
had up there. And there's always going to be that trade-off. But that's what adult decision making looks like. That's what being an adult is versus being a kid.
Right.
So as we think about, I don't know how we got there. That was a cool tangent, though. That was fun.
It was. I like
So
that.
going back a little bit to your story here, where we're like, okay, don't feel at home, want to feel more at home in this new version of my body, like in this new stage. How do I go from, hey, there's a lot of good that came with this, but how do I go to better in this new
Hmm.
stage? And also then dealing with it in the way that maybe you wouldn't have normally been able to deal with it in the past because you had this back injury and some of the things. So what were some of the things that you focused on, because you couldn't exercise in a traditional sort of sense for the first 3 months until you had your surgery, and some of the other things that you did? What did you do a little bit differently this time around? What did you focus on versus the things that you did in any other iteration of trying to be healthier, fitter, etc.?
Right. So, I mean, I couldn't really lift weights. I think the most weight I lifted was like 15. And even that was like for one exercise,
Yeah.
It was like most of what I did was body weight, if even it was like weight at all. It was a lot of
Mm-hmm.
like stretching and yeah, just not, I mean, not what you would consider like strengthening at
Mm-hmm.
all. It was just kind of like helping my body, I guess.
Moving, yeah,
I had to
getting the blood
moving,
flowing. Yeah,
movement,
yeah.
movement. My doctor said, my chiropractor said that motion is lotion. That was
Yep.
like a big thing that she says, but it was really true.
It's a little uncomfortable sounding, but she's not wrong.
No, she's not wrong. Well, because I found out like the more I would sit, right? You
Yeah.
think like, okay, my back hurts, I should
Mm-hmm.
sit or I
Yeah.
should lay down because my back hurts and I need my back to recover, right? So like I kept thinking like, oh, I need to rest,
Mm-hmm.
like physically rest. And everyone I was talking to was like, no, you actually need to do the opposite.
Yeah.
You need to move. Like
Mm-hmm.
you and my chiropractor were saying walk as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Even like a back book that I read about back injury and
Mm-hmm.
like how to like help without surgery. Walking was like the number one thing to do, because it's like low pressure on your body,
Mm-hmm.
but really good to like that movement, especially because
Mm-hmm.
mine was like lower back. So that like hip movement back and
Mm-hmm.
forth was huge. Like I would feel the difference when I didn't walk. Once I started walking, I would feel the physical difference in my body when I didn't walk. So that was huge. Walking was a big one. Um, Stretching, like I said, I did stretching and I did it and I still do like every morning, usually every night. Night sets me up to have a better morning.
Mm-hmm.
If I stretch in the night at night, I feel better in the morning. And then like nutrition, water, and like to be honest, it wasn't like I went like crazy and said, okay, I'm cutting out all sugar, I'm cutting out all dairy, I'm doing, I didn't do this like crazy cut or diet or something to get,
Mm-hmm.
um and then like focus more on water
Mm-hmm.
intake for a couple reasons. Like one is because you eat less if you drink
Mm-hmm.
more.
This is true.
It just is. Your stomach
Yeah.
is more full, and so you eat less food.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is just like, once again, when we talk about like, I think sometimes we think of fitness as like one part of who we are, of our
Mm-hmm.
physical self, but like we have to think of fitness and health as like our whole self. So water was good for my whole self, which may sound weird, like emotionally and stuff, but I've
Mm-hmm.
actually done some reading about how if you don't have the right amount of water, how it can affect you emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so like it's for your whole self to have the
Mm-hmm.
water that you need every day and to realize how much water I actually needed every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When
Yeah.
you don't, I've always been someone like, I'm not somebody anyways that drinks like a ton of soda, or it wasn't like a huge thing for me to drink water. Some people I think don't really drink water and then they have to drink water and that's like, oh man, how do I do this? I already
Yep.
drank water. I just had to increase the amount that I was drinking.
Mm-hmm.
um so it was just like little steps, like we see so often that like these, like making these big cuts and like I said, these big diets and these big things are like, that's the way to go if you want to like
Mm-hmm.
see physical change in yourself. But it was like all these little things stacked on top of each other that when you can look back now, you're like, oh wow, where I am a different person now than I was a year ago because of all these little changes that I've made in my
Mm-hmm.
health. And even like the way that like I make decisions about how I eat or when I eat, or not even when I eat, but when I eat certain foods and when I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like trying to have control. That was another thing. Like I felt like I was totally out of control of what I ate. I
Yeah.
just ate what I wanted to eat
Mm-hmm.
and did not think about it. I just ate what I wanted to eat. I mean, sometimes I thought about, oh, I should probably throw in a vegetable here or something, but I just ate what I wanted. I ate fruit all the time, so that's helpful. But
Yeah.
I just I was like a child. I mean, talk about like going, like
Mm-hmm.
being an adult and being a child. I was like a child because I ate what I wanted to eat. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sitting there telling my kids, no, you can't eat that.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I'm eating whatever I want to eat. No, you can't have that many sweets. Meanwhile, I'm like eating spoonfuls
Yeah.
of frosting, when I'm making something, baking something. It's like my kids are probably like, you suck, man.
Yeah. if the only explanation for why you're doing something and they can is because I'm a grown up and you're not, that's a
Right.
tough explanation to pull over as they get a little bit older. It's like I can do
Yeah.
this because I'm a
Yeah.
grown up and you're a child, and
Yeah.
when the flip side of it
Yeah.
is they could
Yeah.
probably handle the frosting better than we could.
Right.
Uh,
I
that's so
had to even
interesting.
make like decisions about sweets in particular because sweets is like I would say my
Mm,
biggest like weakness for
mm,
sure. I had to make decisions like I cannot eat more sweets than I allow my kids to eat in a day.
yeah.
Like that was a big one for me.
Mm,
Like I was like, how can I like rein it in? You know,
mm-hmm,
like I because I can eat a lot of sweets before I'm like, oh, I feel gross.
mm-hmm. Yeah, the threshold is
So
high.
that the threshold is
Mm-hmm,
very high for me. It's
mm-hmm,
been years working up to this. But
yeah.
yeah, that was one of the things that I had to like say, okay, if I'm allowing myself to eat more than my children are eating, and I'm the one telling them, no, you can't eat more
Mm-hmm,
sweets because you've had enough sweets today, then that's probably a problem. And I need to
yeah.
be like, okay, this is my sweet for the day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Well,
not I can eat whatever I want.
it's being the adult in our own lives. Like I think that
Right.
oftentimes we can look at our kids and for the best reasons be like, hey, like we're all done TV, or you can't have pizza for dinner for the fourth night in a row. I mean, like this is
Right.
it's bedtime, like you need to go to bed, like all these things that we do for our kids, and then we just don't parent ourselves. And part of it might be that we're bandwidthed out, like we're we're bound,
Right.
we've been
Right.
setting
Absolutely.
boundaries on our kids all day, and it's like I'm gonna just let it rip. um
Yeah.
but the idea of there's nobody, like it's a cool thing about being an adult, right? That you don't have to answer anybody. Like you could go to the grocery store, get a half a dozen donuts, sit in your car, and eat them all, and there's nobody
Right.
that's going to stop you.
Right.
Just no, like you are an adult, you can make that decision. Um, but if we're doing it for our kids, I think sometimes the question is why won't we do it for ourselves?
Right.
Because then we're
Yeah.
acting like children, where
Right.
like our kids are the same ages basically, and
Yeah.
the the moment where we as adults are like, I don't want to do X, or I want to do Y, and
Hmm.
we, for whatever reason, don't think that we ought to, or you know what I mean? Like, oh, I want to have this, therefore I should be able to have it the way that I want it. I want what I
Yeah.
want when I want it, right? You're acting like a toddler.
Right.
You're acting like my 4-year-old who's having a meltdown because his dinner is on an orange plate instead of a blue plate.
Right.
Like that's effectively what we're doing, is we're acting like a child because we're not willing to, like, what makes adults different aside from choosing between good and better is the ability to delay gratification and see
Right.
beyond the instant moment. And we do it in a lot of other
Right.
areas, but for some reason when it comes to like the taking care of ourselves thing, punting to the future is really challenging.
Yeah. A word that I like try to be like, I guess, people have like a word of the year or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really into that, but like I have a word that like I just want to live my life by, I guess. So
Mm-hmm.
like always is like intentional or
Mm-hmm.
intentionality. So like
Yep.
I want to live my life that way in every other way, like the way I speak to people, the
Mm-hmm.
way I like how much time I spend on my phone, how much time I spend in front of the TV, right? I try to be very intentional about so many other things in my life because I know the effect that they can have on me and others, right? So why was it that like I wasn't doing that with the food I was putting in my body,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I can do this intentionally with like every other thing in my life, why was it that food was so much harder? Or I don't even know if it was harder, just like I wasn't even thinking about doing it intentionally. I was just
Yeah.
eating. Yeah.
Well, we come back to like there's a lot of reasons for that, certainly, but I
Right.
love the idea of intentionality because I think that was above all else for you, even some of the things that you said early on, which was like walking and water and being mindful of your eating, that's what drove, like, in terms of physical transformation. I'll let you talk about it, but like before you could strength train, like in the traditional sense, you
Right.
made a lot of what people would consider to be like, that's a lot of progress in terms of body
Yeah.
composition and physical transformation, just from the intentional choices in those other areas.
Right.
Whereas oftentimes we chase the strength training or the workout program, like, hey, I'm gonna get back into shape, I'm gonna start working out again, right? Like that's the first thing that we go to do. And that's I feel like a little bit of the, all right, I'm gonna be intentional with my screen time or my phone or whatever it is, because those are not necessary things in your day, if that makes
Right.
sense. Like, you are going to eat
Yeah,
every day,
absolutely.
you're going to move every day, you're going to drink every day. Like, all of those things are basic human functions. And being intentional with your basic human functions is a different part of our existence than it is being intentional with either doing or not doing something.
Yeah.
Like, I'm either going to watch TV or not watch TV. I'm going to work out or I'm not going to work out. And if I don't work out, it doesn't mean that, like, I'm in a really bad place. If I don't eat anything, that's like, I have to eat something. Like, that's a different,
Right.
I have to move
Right.
my body. It's just a question of how much am I going to move my body. It's all a matter of degrees and intentionality and all of that. So can you talk a little bit about the intentionality piece of it, especially when the things that you would traditionally want to do weren't on the table, and then how that
Right.
lent itself to some of the progress that you made both before and post surgery when you were able to get back into training?
Yeah. So it was like I think I had worked with you for 3 months
Mm-hmm.
before my surgery happened. And then I had 6 weeks after surgery where I couldn't really do much besides like walking.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely couldn't lift anything for 6 weeks. So it wasn't like it was a long period. I mean, it was like the amount of time that you would think somebody would be doing the strength training,
Yep.
right? And would see these like physical results, right? From the strength training. I mean, I've realized like how uh what's the word I'm thinking of? This happens to me all the time, actually.
Yeah.
And my husband laughs at me when it happens, and then he pretends he knows the word. And sometimes he
Mm-hmm.
does. Inflamed. I think that's the word
There
I'm
we go.
looking for. Inflammation. I
Yeah.
didn't realize how like inflamed I was
Mm-hmm.
from foods I was eating and from not working out and from lack of water. Like I haven't lost 50 pounds, 60 pounds, right? A lot of times you see those transformations and it's like, wow, that's a huge transformation.
Mm-hmm.
But some people look at me and they're like, how much weight have you lost? And they think I've lost like 30 or 40 pounds. And I'm like, I've only lost 15. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like, which is not, I'm not saying
Yeah.
like losing 15 is nothing, but it's not
No.
like I've lost this unbelievable amount of weight. But what happened was I didn't realize how bloated I was. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
just bloated. Like my face was bloated, my
Mm-hmm.
stomach was bloated. And once I started like eating better and walking more and drinking the right amount of water, like the bloat went away.
Mm-hmm.
Even before like the actual weight loss, I think happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like because it was like really quickly, like, whoa, I lost a lot of weight, and was like, you've lost 5 pounds. I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's really not that much weight.
Mm-hmm.
um, but I had to really think about like who and early on, like this was one of the like kind of exercises you have us do really early on
Mm-hmm.
is like make a list of kind of like things that I kind of made a list of like things that I wasn't able to do, things I wanted to be able to do, the
Mm-hmm.
person I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I had to really think about like who do I want to become? Like
Mm-hmm.
who is the person that I want to be? And then that kind of can drive all of your other decisions. So whether it's food or walking or working out or TV or whatever,
Yep.
who am I wanting to become for myself, for my children, for my husband, for my friends? Who am I wanting to become? What kind of person do I want to be? Um, do I want to be the type of person that is not able to go on a hike because I don't know if I'm physically able to do it, if I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
make it? Do I want to be the no? And I don't. And do I want to be the kind of person who like after 5 minutes of roughhousing with my kids is like, okay, mom needs a break now for like the
Mm.
rest of the day, right? I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
be that mom, and I was thinking about my future and thinking about grandchildren, right? Like I some people would say I had kids young, whatever. I don't think it was that young. It was in my
No.
late 20s. Um, but I'm really thankful that like as long as I live a long, strong, happy, healthy life, like I can see my kids do a lot of things in life. Hopefully I'll see them get married and graduate, and like I'll have great grandchildren one day, and I want to be able to like be healthy enough in all of those things that I can really be present and not like wondering if I'm going to be able to, I don't know, dance at my daughter's wedding, or I don't know, like just things like that. Like I want to be physically able to do that. I want to be physically able to do a hike with my kids, or to,
Mm-hmm.
I really love national parks. And I am so excited for when my kids are older and I'm not afraid of them falling off a cliff. And I can go.
Yeah.
Right now, national parks are not really in our
No.
thing, but I'm very much looking forward to the future when they're a little bit older and I can trust them a bit more. And to go to the Grand Canyon and to hike around the Grand Canyon and, whatever, like all these places that are beautiful that I want to experience with my kids, that I want to be healthy enough to do that and to not and to feel good. Like maybe you might be able to do those things if you're not healthy, but like you're going to feel like crap afterwards
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to be hurting. Like probably at the end of the day, you go to the hotel and you're like, I am so exhausted. I can't move. Right. I wanted to be like, that was fun. I had a
Yeah.
great time. My body feels good. Right. I wanted to be able to have that. So those were kind of like the things I have to and continue to like go back to when I feel like, oh no, I want to just go back.
Yeah.
But even now, like I feel like I've gotten to the place too where like there is no going back, which is
Yeah.
really a cool place to be. Like I think when you diet or you do these like fad things, when you mess up,
Mm-hmm.
or like when you're no longer following the diet, you're like, well, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
Like you think kind of like your health is over, I guess. It's
Mm-hmm.
over. I didn't stick with the diet, so it's done and I can't go back. I can't go back to that. But when you're just like living a lifestyle of thinking about who am I becoming, you can continue to ask that question. So even if you like there's grace in fitness and health,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're not going to get it 100% of the time.
Mm.
So in those moments where we, fail,
Yeah.
if you want to call it that, I wouldn't call it failure, but in those moments where we, don't do the thing that we wish we were doing, or we're not able to for whatever reason, like we don't need to kick ourselves and say, okay, well, I guess that's it. Like that was the chance I had and now it's gone. It's like
Yeah.
every day you have the chance to become the person you want to become. Every day.
Mm.
So you can
Yeah.
make a choice every day to be that person. It's not like I didn't do the thing today, so I'm not that person.
Yeah.
I listened to a podcast the other day that was like um, talking about being a runner. I would not consider myself a runner. But I tried it and I hated it, and we're done.
Yeah.
We're done with running. But
Yeah.
the guy was talking about running, and he was saying like, you can train for a marathon and do the marathon, and then what?
Yeah.
Like you did the marathon, right? That was the goal. You did the marathon, or you can say I'm a runner and I run. And maybe you run a marathon, or maybe you run 5 miles, or maybe you run 3 miles, but you're still a runner
Mm-hmm.
because you got up that day and you ran. Like you are a
Mm-hmm.
runner. So you have to think about like, once again, who do I want to be? If Danielle is healthy, what is healthy defined for me? And that can be hard because it's
Mm-hmm.
different for every person. But you have to think about you. What is healthy for you? What is right for you? And then say who's that person that I want to be? Who is that person I want to become? And make those decisions every day to be the person you want to become. And there's like a ton of science behind all this too, neurologically, about
Mm.
those little things, those little
Yeah.
steps that we make a big impact, right? And can cause great change in us over time.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of trying to make a big change, a lot of times it makes us fail, right? We just say like, I can't do it. So those little
Yeah.
steps make the difference neurologically in your brain to say like, no, I can do this. I can be this person. I can become the person I want to be by making these little steps along the way.
That's the relationship I think a lot of people have with fitness, which is goal oriented, which is not inherently wrong, but this is a conversation I'm having with another client of mine, which is, well, quite a few clients of mine, and you and I had the conversation
Mm,
as well, which is like maybe the goal isn't more weight loss, right? Because the
right.
relationship oftentimes starts, not all the time, but oftentimes starts with weight loss or body composition or whatever it is. And the byproduct of that is, hey, I'm going to feel better. I'll feel more confident. I'll feel more at home in my body. I'll have more energy, all of these things. If that's how the relationship is defined with exercise and nutrition, what happens when you lose the weight? That's you've ran the marathon. Like I trained for a marathon. I got hurt on the last training run, so I ran 22 miles and then got hurt. So that's for me. I ran a marathon. Like I will never do it
Right.
again.
Yeah.
It was when Megan and I were
Right.
dating 12 years ago, and she wanted to run a marathon, and I wanted to date her, and so we trained for a
Right.
marathon. Is
Yep.
basically
It's
what happened.
amazing what you can do.
Yeah, I was like, man, I'll do whatever. I'll run behind you the whole way.
Right.
It's a great view.
Yeah,
But
right.
we, I'll never run a marathon. Like I'm good. Like because it was about the goal. I didn't want to be a runner. Like I didn't want to do that. And so as soon as the thing was gone, then it changed. And so what happens if I'm pursuing weight loss and I lose the weight? And I haven't changed anything about my identity. My whole relationship with the thing has been about the goal. This is
Right.
where, like, and I do way too many financial analogies, but I think that there are so many. This is like the people who work their whole lives for the sake of having a certain amount of money to retire. And then you retire, and it's like, what do I do now? Because my whole
Yeah.
purpose has been to work to save enough money to retire. And now I've done it and I don't have an identity of who I want to be in this stage. And that's why people who retire early die young because
Right.
off like there's so much of a correlate. And that doesn't mean that you can't, right? I'm not, you can make your own decision. But if you give up on like this thing that has been your identity this whole time and it's been your
Right.
relationship with it this whole time, and then you achieve the goal and you haven't changed who you are or your relationship to it in the process. And so then what people try to do next, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, is like, what's the next goal to pursue? Because I've reached a good weight for me. Like I'm okay. Like you've said, like
Right.
I'm okay if I lose a little bit more weight, but if I don't, I'm also cool here. Like, I'm in a range that's fine with me. Um,
Mhm.
Maybe I do more, maybe I don't. But what am I gonna pursue? And oftentimes we think like, okay, I need another fitness goal. I'm
Right.
gonna,
Right.
do my first pull up, or you know what I mean. And that's not necessarily what it's about. Because again, the goal is, I'm trying to think of the word. It's a circle. It's self. I can't think of what I'm trying to say. It's like it's self driven, like a fitness goal.
Yeah.
That's your whole relationship with fitness is centered around fitness versus what you
Right.
talked about, which is the rest of your life.
Right.
Like, what does fitness allow you to do? What does a healthy relationship with food allow you to do with the other 23 hours of your day? Like
Right.
it's not just like life is lived outside of the gym. And so the idea of like taking the bandwidth that you've put toward how do I look? How do I feel? What's the weight on the scale? My workouts, all of this stuff, and shifting it to something else and having that be what do I want to do? But even more than that, like like you said, who do I want to be? And what would that person do?
Right. Yeah. And like you said, like the goals are not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Not a bad thing at all. Goals are really good, especially when you're like trying to get to yourself to a healthy place, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
goals are not bad. But when you let the goal define you, that's when
Mm-hmm.
it gets bad. Or like, or you allow the goal to like, people say all the time that that comparison is the thief of joy, right? That's like a
Mm-hmm.
common phrase. But I think it's just a thief. It's a thief of a lot more things than joy. It's a
Mm-hmm.
thief of peace and hope and so many other things. Like even if I'm comparing myself, like we talked about earlier, to myself in high school, you don't even have to be comparing yourself to an influencer or Hollywood. You can be comparing yourself to who you were 10, 15, 20 years ago. Instead of saying like, this is, we look back instead of looking forward,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to look forward. Looking back is not usually super helpful unless there's like some, dramatic things that you need to work on, or work through. But, looking forward is really the place that you need to be to like make these changes in your life of like, once again, the person that you want to become. That's gonna be a much better definition for you than I want to be 160 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
My goal is to reach 160 pounds. Okay, well, you may reach it or you may not.
Well,
Yeah.
and again, hate to use cliches, but cliches are cliches for a reason, right? The journey versus the destination. But like, let's just take hiking as a
Yeah.
for instance, right? Like, if going on a hike, the only purpose of going on the hike is the view at the top, that's going to be tough. It
Mm,
doesn't mean that the view isn't great, but you're going to spend 4+ hours hiking a mountain for a
right.
5-minute view at the top. Like, that's not a good trade off for most people.
Right.
Like, most people aren't
Right.
doing that trade, and it's not worth it. Like, it's just
Right.
frankly not for most people. It's just the view is it's the physical act of the hike, and I'm outside and I'm in nature, and there's views along the way, and there's different things, but it's also like I'm the process of like I do the thing. And so this is comes back to what you talked about of the quote unquote failures. they
Right.
they diminish if we're not just focused on the goal, because you think about it as a parent, right? Nobody goes 10 for 10 or 100 for 100 on the day with interactions with their kids. If you
Mm-hmm.
do, you can come and be a live-in nanny with me. Like, I'll pay you whatever you need. um, but we just don't. But that doesn't mean that all of a sudden, oh, I lost it on my kid for whatever reason. Like, I just got frustrated and I snapped and I didn't handle that as well as I would have liked to. That doesn't inherently make me a bad dad. I haven't failed as a dad. I don't need to restart with a new kid because I wrecked
Right.
that relationship with that one. You know what I
Right.
mean? Oh, I'll just do a mulligan.
Right.
That's not what people with
Right.
10 kids are doing. It's just like, all right, try
Right.
again.
Try again.
Yeah. Get a new one. Just restart the clock on this. That's just not how we
Yeah.
do. And we don't do that in any other area in our lives. Like, you mess up at work, you don't be like, all right, I might as well be fired, or you quit because
Right.
you made a mistake, because we recognize that that's part of the journey, is you learn through the process of it and all of that, those cliche things. But it's also like, what happens when we're so goal focused is we amplify our failures. So if I'm shooting for 3 workouts in a week and I do 2, that one that I missed feels like 10. And I
Hmm.
don't give the attention to the 2 that I did.
Right.
If I am not willing to celebrate the wins with the same energy that I mourn the failures, then I'm going to fail long term.
Right.
Because 2 workouts is better than no workouts. And if you're consistently doing 2 workouts a week, even if you're shooting for 3, eventually you become a worker outer.
Right.
It's what you do. Like, you do the
Right.
thing. Like,
Right.
that's what you do. That's
Hmm.
part of your identity now. And so that's the
Yeah.
intentional piece of it. It's like, I'm not a dieter. I'm not on a diet. I'm not on a cut. I'm not, I'm
Right.
intentional with I eat. I'm mindful. I'm a mindful eater. That's part of who I am. And and
Right.
my actions are, are reflecting that person. And the question is like, with every decision I make, I'm either becoming more of person A or more of person B. And
Right.
so thinking about what would the person that I want to be do.
Yep.
So as you've shifted now into like a little bit more of maintenance, if that makes any sense, like you're kind of
Yep.
like, hey, what have been the things that you have focused on? Like, I'm becoming this person.
Um, I mean, a walker, that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Walking is just good for you in general, but it's
Mm-hmm.
especially good for people, like I said, that have back injuries.
Mm-hmm.
So, walking is great. And I just love being outside, like somebody who is outside, enjoy, like I talk about the journey. I like a walk for my health, but I also like to walk outside. I
Mm-hmm.
just like to like take it in or listen to a podcast while I'm walking or listen to music while I'm walking or just not listen to anything and just kind of take in the sounds of nature. Some people are probably like that sounds very weird, but I'm like listen to the birds, listen,
Yeah.
whatever. It's just like it's good for your soul. It's more
Mm-hmm.
than just good for when we talk about once again your whole being. It's good for your physical self, but just good for your soul too. Um, Nutrition too, but like I'm not, I think when you're first trying to lose weight, nutrition can be a very like you're like more hyper focused on it. And you definitely like once you lose the weight, you can't go back to the way you ate before, or you're just going to go back to the way you were before. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I've lost the weight and now I can go back and eat the way I did and I'll stay the same. Like obviously that's
Mm-hmm.
not going to happen. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like I'm a little less focused on, because I don't really have to think about it anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
think is really it. Like at the beginning, you really have to think about like portions or like what's on your plate or how much. And to be honest, like probably my biggest struggle in nutrition besides sweets is like I probably almost never get the amount of protein I need in a day. Um, but it's not like I'm not eating well. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
still eating well. It's not like I'm not eating protein and eating French fries
Mm-hmm.
instead of protein. Like I might not be eating as much protein, but I'm eating broccoli or I'm eating,
Mm-hmm.
some people are going to be like, why would you do that? But, or
Mm-hmm.
fruit. I love fruit. I could eat bowls of fruit all day and be very, very happy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm just, yeah, I'm not as hyper focused or like I said, just not, I don't have to think about it as much as I did
Yeah.
before. I really like, even just like vitamins, I try to take my vitamins every day.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, for like whole health, right? It
Mm-hmm.
makes me like in the winter, I take more vitamin D because it's
Mm-hmm.
dark and sad. And
Yep.
my whole being needs vitamin D to cope
Yep.
with the sadness of the darkness.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I've just really like had to think about like my whole and like honestly, like there's some weeks I get all the workouts in. Awesome. I feel great. I feel very accomplished. I met the goal that I wanted to meet, right? And there's some weeks I don't. There's some weeks I get one or two or zero in because of, what I was sick or I don't know, you're traveling or just life, things happen
Mm-hmm.
and you can't, even if you scheduled the thing, when you have a sick kid at home, you can't be like, hey, I know you're really sick and you just want to cuddle with mom on the couch, but I have to go work out for an hour. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, good luck with your sickness. And I'm just going to go, like,
Yeah.
you just have to you have to be a parent and you have to
Yeah.
be, you have to do life. But not allowing those moments, like you said, those failures or whatever to be like, okay, well, now I just have to give up because I wasn't able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I just move on. It's like, okay, I
Yeah.
didn't get the workout that day. Maybe I can get it in another day. Or if I don't, no big deal. I'll just start right back at it and try to get 3 next week.
Yeah.
It's not like the failures are so much less now than they were before because I have a different perspective than I did before.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to
So,
the no going back that
right.
you mentioned, which is when you get to the point where you're like, I'm not stopping. Like
Right.
I might have different degrees of it's like the parent thing again. Like you have a kid and you're mom or dad for life. Like I will be dad for the rest of my life. And so when you
Mm-hmm.
like get to the point where you're like, I I don't get a break. Like this is forever,
Right.
then failures matter less because you're like, I gotta show up again. Not tomorrow, but in 3 minutes with the
Right.
next thing.
Yeah.
Like there's
Yep.
every moment is an opportunity to do the things that align with what it is that we who we're becoming and who we're defining ourselves to be versus or not. And so
Mm-hmm.
when we take the timetable off of it and be like, for the rest of my life, I'm going to do these things. It doesn't really matter if I get, let's just do some simple math here for a second. 2 workouts a week for a year is 104 workouts. 3 workouts a week for a year is 156 workouts. Is there a difference between them? 100% there is. There's absolutely a difference between 100 and 150. Is it the moon? No. Like somebody who works out 100 times is going to be most of the, it's not even, you're not going to be 2/3 of the person who worked out 150 times. You're going to be 90% of the person who worked out 150 times. You're going to get
Mm-hmm.
most of the results. But the problem is the person who works out 3 times a week for 4 weeks and then takes 6 months off because they missed a week. That's where we get into
Right.
trouble because we get into the like, oh, I'm not the person who can do this. And
Right.
I
It's like
think that
all
there
or
were,
nothing.
yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think there were times with that. I think that's maybe the place to kind of close here because there were times for you, or one other thing, I guess, after this, but there were times for you where it was like, this sucks. Like, this just does not feel like it can sound in this journey that Danielle has just been crushing, you know what I mean? Like, which she has in a lot of ways, but that doesn't mean that there haven't been times where you're like, I this is not going great. This is not going
Mm-hmm.
great.
Yeah.
Like it was
Yeah.
the last month basically has been a lot of Danielle being like, it's not going great, Jeff. I'm going to be honest with you. So
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about your mindset surrounding those times or during those times, and then maybe how it's shifted a little bit from you know a year ago to now.
Right. Yeah. Like I just had to realize like those times can't define me. And
Mm-hmm.
those, like it's been rough recently because man, when you have 3 kids, I keep telling people it's like living in a petri dish, especially in the winter months. Man, it's like everyone's coming home sick all the time. So I
Mm-hmm.
was sick from like one thing to the next for like, oh my gosh, almost 2 months. It was just like, just killer, man. And it's really hard in those times to like have the like desire to
Mm-hmm.
work out or to eat right, or right, like when you feel bad you want to eat bad,
Mm-hmm.
like you want comfort food, right? You feel
Yep.
bad, you want comfort food. So like it was definitely harder for me, and in definitely in those moments I felt like a failure, absolutely. In those moments where I was like, well, I'm giving in to my desire right now, I
Mm-hmm.
felt like a failure, right? And I had to like allow myself to feel the feeling, like don't
Mm-hmm.
diminish the feeling, but move on.
Mm-hmm.
Like don't allow that moment or that day to define the rest of your life. Like
Mm-hmm.
it, you have the rest of your life. This was a month of the rest of your life, right? If I
Mm-hmm.
live 80 years,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to, I would hate to look back and be like, that one month ruined the
March of
rest of my life.
2024. Yeah.
Right.
Now, March of 2020, you could be like, all right, that was a little bit of a rough month for
Right.
everybody, but
Maybe.
like, but
Yeah.
March of 24 is just not gonna like. Let's not let that be the month
Yes.
that
Yeah,
wrecks us.
it just doesn't. And the same, like you can think of it on a large scale or on a small
Mm.
scale, right?
Yeah.
Either way, like that day doesn't need to define the rest of my week. That week doesn't need to define the rest of my month. That month doesn't need to define the rest of my year, right? All these things. And like last year was so hard because with back surgery, honestly, like it just like knocked me down, and I felt really like I can't, how can I do this? How can I
Mm-hmm.
be the better version of me that I want to
Mm-hmm.
be with the back pain that I'm feeling, and with the like, how can I come back from this? And not to sound
Hmm.
funny, not to be funny about it, but how can I
Mm-hmm.
come back from this? um, but like really, um, and then to just go like, once again, this does not need to define the rest of my life. This was a time, right? High school was a time. These things were moments in my life, post or postpartum is the rest of your life, but like that time of um nursing and whatever, those
Mm-hmm.
early years was a time, a stage, a season, however you want to phrase it. Like, I think when you're young, you can only really think of the here and now,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as you get older, you can think better about past and future and
Mm-hmm.
present, and you can see life like that, whereas when you're young you can only see life here and now. So you have to get to a point in your life and in your maturity where you say, okay, I can see that right now it sucks. Right now it's really hard for me for whatever reason, whether it's like an emotional reason or a life situation or whatever. It's really hard for me right now. Okay, it's hard, let it be hard right now, and then let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to the next thing, because this doesn't need to be Danielle forever.
Yeah.
And it can't
There's
be, or I'm going to go into a deep depression, and
yeah.
and it's going to be over, right? Like, I can't allow that
Yeah.
to be. I have to make steps forward, even if they're those little steps at a time. What decision can I make right now
Mm-hmm.
that can change tomorrow and the next day?
Well, and we've talked about that a lot. Is like, what are the low barrier to entry things that we can do? It's like, all right, I don't feel great right now. What can I do? Well, I can drink water. Even if I'm sitting on the
Right,
couch with my sick kid, I can drink water. Like what
right.
what can I do right now that is going to be what the person I would want to be would do, that makes me
Yeah.
feel more like the person I want to feel like. And the
Hmm.
more I do the things that the person I want to do would do, the more I become that person, the easier it
Right.
becomes for me to do more of those things. And then the byproduct of that is I'm going to have what those people have, right? That person has. I'm going to have energy, I'm going to have confidence, I'm going to have freedom, I'm going to have all of these things that I want to have as a result of focusing on the becoming versus focusing on the achieving.
Hmm. Yeah. If we only look at like the things I can't do, you can
Mm-hmm.
never move on. You can
Mm-hmm.
never take that next step. Instead, you have to think about, what can I do now? What can I do right now?
Mm-hmm.
And that is honestly like life changing in every area of your life. What can I do
Mm-hmm.
right now? Instead of getting stuck in this, I can't possibly do that.
Yeah, because there's very little in our life that we can't come back from. Like I
Hmm.
heard, and I'm not a big Jeff Bezos guy, but I heard him say this. Like, there's at Amazon, they think about their decisions in two categories. There's one-way doors and there's two-way doors. One-way door decisions are ones that are really tough to walk back. Two-way door decisions are, what, like, there's a cost to it, but you can walk it back. He's like, we make two-way door decisions all the time. Like, without a second thought, anybody can make a two-way door decision, basically. If it's a one-way door decision, we're going to take our time with that. And that's the difference between angsty teenage Jeff, right, versus adult Jeff, is that I'm making, like, if I have to make a decision about something that's going to be done in a week and a half, I don't even think about it, right? Like, I'm just going to
Yep.
make the call. If it's a
Yep.
decision that's going to affect the next 5-10 years of my life, right, that's going to be where we spend some time on it. But if I'm focusing on, I missed a workout, that is a two-way door situation. Like, that is
Hmm.
very easy to, like, The problem is that we treat that as a one-way door decision. Like, I have missed the workout, therefore I have failed. Therefore, I am not this person. Therefore, I might as well not bother. And when we treat two-way door decisions like one-way door decisions, that's where we end up staying stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate your time, Danielle. Obviously, I feel like we could chat. I mean, you and I talk all the time, so we could talk for a long time. But trying to stay on
Yeah.
this. So, anything kind of last thoughts before we wrap up on the experience? Or anything we didn't touch on that you wanted to make sure was said? It's okay if the answer is no.
No, I have a really quick one for parents, honestly. I mean, for anybody, but I think for parents, especially like I'm mostly a stay-at-home mom, so I'm with my kids a lot. Is learning how to do things with your kids. Like, I thought I can't possibly do workouts with children because how am I going to fit that time in? And I've just learned to do them with them. When they're in the room, when I'm watching them, like, I don't have time to get up. Yeah, I can't. I'm not going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm also not going to do my workout at 9 o'clock at night, especially when it's like the only time that my husband and I have together by ourselves. And other things in life too, but that's just like a good example of learning how to do things with your kids. Do it with them. And it's been really amazing because then you see your kids doing the workouts and it's like the best
The videos
thing.
are the best thing that Danielle sends me. Like, look at this
It's so
video.
cute.
Yeah. It's so awesome. But it also shows them
Yeah.
shows them who you are and what you value.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
mommy takes care of herself.
Right. And I hope that that instills something in them that as they grow up, that they'll see like that they'll want to do that too, that they'll want to take care of themselves too. That I set the example for them so that they too can live a long, healthy life as well.
100%. They're always watching. They're always
Yep.
watching. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Danielle. If you want to chat with Danielle more, just let me know. I'm sure that she'd be open to chatting with you. Or if you're in the Northern Virginia area and need a photographer, Danielle is a fantastic photographer in that area. But I appreciate you coming on, Danielle. And just super proud of you as a friend and your coach. And it's been awesome to walk along this with you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been good.
Awesome. Well, appreciate y'all listening. Do all the things that you do when you listen to a podcast. Rate, I'll subscribe to all the things. All right. And we'll talk to you next time.